Our next guest is former special envoy to the Middle East under President Trump. In his new book, Jason Greenblatt takes readers inside the White House for some of the Trump administration's biggest diplomacy triumphs, including the signing of the Abraham Accords. Author of In the Path of Abraham, How Donald Trump Made Peace in the Middle East and How to Stop Joe Biden from Unmaking It, Jason Greenblatt joins us now. Welcome to Rising.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're so happy to have you. Talk to us about the book and how important it was, from your perspective, for this agreement, the Abraham Agreement, to be reached.
Well, the book was intended to sort of shatter the myths about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the Israeli-Arab conflict, and try to give the Biden administration some advice, in particular about the Iran deal, which they don't seem to be heeding if news reports are accurate. So I think it's a particularly timely book right now. And it does take people into the behind the scenes without any kind of gossip or backstabbing, but the road that led to the Abraham Accords, which is only continuing to help stabilize the Middle East.
And what do you think Biden is doing wrong right now? The kind of subtitle of the book suggests that the Biden administration is threatening or putting in jeopardy what the Trump administration achieved. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I mean, he's basically making all of our allies, once again, as they did with the Obama administration, very, very uncomfortable, very nervous. They're now trying to figure out how to ally themselves with others, including China and even Iran. You see ambassadors being given again back to Iran and from Iran to the region. So the region is extraordinarily nervous right now. Nobody knows what to expect, and people believe that the Biden administration is abandoning the region by signing this deal with Iran, or potentially signing this deal with Iran.
Jason, when I remember hearing about the Abraham Accords, it was very bittersweet. On the one hand, it seemed like such an incredible achievement. On the other hand, talking to dear friends, Palestinians living in, the West Bank, living in Gaza, there was something about it that signaled that they were now no longer sort of on the table in the same way as a barrier to peace between Israel and these other countries. Talk to me about that from your point of view. I know that you too have done a lot of advocacy and a lot of diplomacy in those communities as well. Talk to me about what you would say to Palestinians looking at the Abraham Accords as something that sort of puts them on the back burner.
Well, I wish they weren't on the back burner. They should be on the front burner. What the Abraham Accords did was remove a veto card. The Palestinian leadership, and let's remember this too, is leadership in Ramallah, and there are terrorist leaders in Gaza. They are not willing to negotiate in any way, shape, or form in good faith in a realistic manner with Israel. So they took themselves off the table, if you will. And I wish that weren't the case. But what the Abraham Accords did do was prevent them from allowing Israel to make peace with its Arab neighbors. They did make peace twice before. Now they made peace several more times. But the people who could gain the most from the Abraham Accords are actually the Palestinians, if they'd only come to the table in good faith.
We pulled out of the Iran deal, and I would argue, that itself being a destabilizing move that makes, some kind of conflict more likely. And we did that, not Iran, the Biden administration, trying to, get back to some kind of understanding with Iran. Do you disagree with that perspective? Why should we have gotten out of the Iran deal? What was the reason for doing so?
Sure, I do disagree with the perspective, because what the original Iran deal did was give Iran a fortune of money, which they then used rather than help their people to foment terrorism, to throw missiles and rockets at the UAE, at Saudi Arabia, at Israel, all sorts of mischief and bad acts and murderous acts. In terms of the nuclear part of it, which of course is the most existential threat to the region, and even potentially to the United States, it didn't stop Iran from developing nuclear weapons. It simply held off it for a period of time. Once that deal expired, Iran was actually free to develop nuclear weapons. So the new deal apparently will do the same. Many argue that it's even weaker and shorter. I don't know, because none of us really know what's in there. But what it does is it puts our head in the sand, pretends the problem isn't there, and hope for the best. And then we have to tell our kids when there is a problem, well, we did our best to, delay things, but now it's your problem.
But didn't pulling out of the deal, there's no delaying then, they can go back to, because we did that. If the concern is they might in the future be able to or decide to develop nuclear weapons anyway. I mean, we took that out of the future and we just made it potentially now.
Well, what we do need is a plan B. Nobody seems to have come up with a plan B. It's a fair point, but signing up for a deal that makes no sense is not an excuse for taking a united stand against a regime that wants to murder people around it, destroy Israel, take over Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and others. So you're right, it's not a perfect situation, but at the same time, we don't have unity of opinion on this, and that makes it harder to put pressure on the Iranian regime.
Do you see the Abraham Accords as a cause or a symptom of this kind of realignment that we're now seeing in the Middle East? And where do you see America's role in that going forward?
I see it as both a cause and a symptom, and I think America can play a tremendous role if it stood by our allies, if it didn't disrespect Saudi Arabia, although I think President Biden has started to turn the corner on that. I hope he continues to turn and, in a big way. But I think America could play a very strong role encouraging our friends and allies to work together against terrorism, against the Iranian regime. At the same time, I think that the region could actually join together even without American leadership. I don't think that they need America now that the train has left the station in terms of the Iran deal.
But isn't Saudi Arabia a sponsor of terrorism and violence and all sorts of things, just as like Iran is? So I find it interesting that you say we should have a kind of more confrontational relationship with Iran, but not with Saudi Arabia. It seems like both are up to no good in a lot of ways.
Well, Saudi Arabia is not threatening any of its neighbors. Saudi Arabia is not a terror sponsor state. Saudi Arabia is actually making tremendous strides. I mean, we could talk about the past or we could talk about the future. The future of Saudi Arabia, I think, is extraordinarily bright.
You know President Trump very, very well. You've worked with him for 23 years, I believe is the number. In so many ways, he sort of took an axe to the status quo, to the kind of understanding, of the expert class about so many foreign policy issues. Where did that come from? Where did his view of what was possible in terms of foreign relations come from?
So he took a view, a business-like view. If we can make progress, we're going to make progress. If we can't make progress, we're not going to waste time simply speaking diplomatic speak. And that's the view and the approach that we took. We were respectful, we were diplomatic, but we were also pragmatic. And we said, whether it was to the Palestinians or Israel or Arab neighbors, Israel's Arab neighbors and our allies, look, we're here to make progress. Either you're going to help us make progress, or we have lots of other things to do around the world, and we're going to move on to the other things to do. So help us make progress or not, it's your choice. That's the approach of Trump. He's a very pragmatic business person. He knows he had a limited amount of time in the White House, whether it was 4 years or 8 years, and he wanted to make progress.
So on the topic of President Trump, I wonder if we can ask you, we're sort of a few days out from the affidavit, the heavily redacted affidavit that justified the raid on Mar-a-Lago being released. I wonder if you can tell us anything, if you're comfortable telling us anything about Trump's character that would shed light on, how big of a security risk this posed, what the likelihood is that he took things that would have endangered America's security home with him to Mar-a-Lago. Is there any light you can shed on this from your experience knowing him so well?
Sure. So we still don't know a lot of facts. It was heavily redacted, as you say. The Donald Trump that I know, that I worked for 23 years, is a smart guy. I don't think he would have taken anything that would have endangered people, at least not knowingly. So I'm still sitting back trying to see, I'm reading everything, trying to understand what we're talking about. But until we get more facts, I really don't know, and it's hard to take any kind of opinion. But no, I don't think he would have taken anything intentionally that would have, I guess the two accusations are that would have harmed Americans or spies or informants across the world, and some are even accusing him of taking it in order to enrich himself. Those sound not like the Donald Trump that I know.
I want to push back one more time on the Saudi Arabia thing, just because I think it's an important difference between our perspectives. There's the Jamal Khashoggi, there's the airstrikes in Yemen that have killed thousands of people, alleged to be non-combatant civilian targets, hospitals, etc. I mean, that looks to me like a relationship with a country that is involved in a lot of violence and a lot of bad stuff. So again, I don't know why it should be it seems hypocritical to be like letting them off the hook, as Biden now is doing. He's wants to beg Saudi Arabia for the oil. I guess we're not producing here, but to excuse what Saudi Arabia is doing and then draw a hard line against Iran again doesn't make a lot of sense from where I'm sitting.
Yeah, well, I agree with your characterization that he's begging Saudi Arabia for the oil that maybe I would say should be producing here. But the two examples, Yemen, the Houthi rebels, or really they're terrorists, have been attacking Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia is defending itself, it's defending its citizens. It's the obligation of any country to defend itself and its citizens, no different than when Hamas terrorizes Israel. As far as Jamal Khashoggi, it's hard. Yes, he took responsibility for what was a heinous act. It was a really just absolutely horrific act. We don't know with certainty. We know what the CIA says, that there's a high degree of likelihood that he ordered it. He said it happened under his watch. And we could forever judge Saudi Arabia by that event, or we could also see where Saudi Arabia is going, the direction that it's going, and recognize that it's a very, very important strategic ally in the region. I don't think it's fair to continue to judge a country through the Jamal Khashoggi lens forever.
Well, so just continuing this point, one more for just another minute. Why is it that if Iran is saying it wants that same deal maker treatment that President Trump was able to bring to so many of these other conflicts with such success, why not extend that to them? Why should there be a hard line there as opposed to other places?
Because the deal that Iran is proposing, and again, we don't know, similar to what's happening with the Mar-a-Lago raid, we don't really know what's going on behind closed doors. But by all accounts, what the deal would be would simply allow Iran to create a nuclear weapon in several years. That's not really a smart deal. The deals that Trump was interested in making were smart deals, long-term deals, deals that made sense for everybody involved. The deal that Iran seemingly is proposing is something that makes sense for it. And yes, to Robbie's point, it makes sense for us for a short period of time. I know Robbie didn't say a short period of time. It makes sense today, but it won't make sense in several years from now. And it certainly won't make sense when more missiles are flying, whether from Lebanon to Israel, Gaza to Israel, Yemen to Saudi Arabia, or Yemen to the UAE or beyond.
Well, Jason Greenblatt, we so appreciate you joining us. Again, the book is In the Path of Abraham, How Donald Trump Made Peace in the Middle East and How to Stop Joe Biden from Unmaking It. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll be back with more Rising right after this.